I would say the first thing is be genuine and authentic about who you are and what your intentions are, because people are either going to be attracted to that or they're not, and that's okay. But as long as you're genuine and authentic, when you are trying to make connections with folks, it's going to be a meaningful relationship that actually bears fruit. So that was another piece that I sort of had to learn there, because I think when I first started out of like, oh man, I need to make connections. I need to get people to help me with growing the business or growing personally even. Kind of started out with let me position myself as something that I'm actually not. Because
your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Greg Workmon. Greg is the founder and CEO of Load Up Technologies, a tech-enabled junk removal company serving customers nationwide. A visionary entrepreneur with over a decade of leadership experience, Greg combines creativity, strategy, and faith-driven purpose to build a scalable systems, empower people, and redefine convenience and trust in the home services industry. Congrats on your success with Load Up, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Carl.
I'm really excited to have you on to talk about the idea of connecting yourself with the right people, because I think there's a lot of when people are thinking about like business networking and building relationships for businesses, they kind of have a certain mindset or a certain way they go about it that often has room for improvement. So what have you found works for you, and what do you recommend other people do when they're trying to scale their businesses?
Yeah. I'll kind of start at the beginning. When I first started out the company, this was 11 years ago. And I didn't really value, wisdom connections back then. I thought I knew everything. I was mid-20s back when I started this company. And, it wasn't until I went through my own trial and error and really falling on my face a few different times where I realized that I needed to start listening to some of the people that I had been connected with that were trying to pour into me, but I wasn't really hearing what they had to say. Back then, I really just didn't, I didn't have the listening ears to really, even want that. But as I became a father and, started having little kids, and, it's kind of the same translatable thing where, kids are terrible at doing what you say. They do what you do. And you really have to model out, what needs to be done rather than just saying what needs to be done. And I just had to observe that. I had to observe, people that I had come in contact with of, these people are really successful. And one of the common things that I found with all these people is they had mentors that were speaking into their business and their life and their, just their sphere of connections. And, I would say that was the biggest thing, a turning point for me, where I started to realize that I didn't know everything and that I needed to be connected with people who were wiser than I was, who have been there and done that and seen what is around the corner from a business perspective. And, I would say the first thing is be genuine and authentic about who you are and what your intentions are, because people are either going to be attracted to that or they're not, and that's okay. But as long as you're genuine and authentic, when you are trying to make connections with folks, it's going to be a meaningful relationship that actually bears fruit. So that was another piece that I sort of had to learn there, because I think when I first started out of like, oh man, I need to make connections. I need to get people to help me with growing the business or growing personally even. Kind of started out with let me position myself as something that I'm actually not, because that's what I think I might need, rather than I'm genuine and authentic in the story and the connections that I'm making. It really it serves both people, whoever that you're engaged with, in the best manner, because you're really presenting who you are up front to folks, and that way they also know how to pour into you. Because if you're falsely presenting something, they may be guiding you in the wrong direction, right? You may be attracting the wrong people. So not sure if that's exactly where you wanted me to go with that question, but that's where we landed.
I think it's great because there is a big problem with people not showing up authentically or not understanding what showing up authentically means, and are often just not knowing and being connected enough with who they really are, because they're so used to putting up that facade, that what they think people want to see, instead of showing up as who they really are. And that makes it harder for them to actually connect with the people they really need to connect with. And there's also, just even if you are in front of the right person for what you need, if you present this kind of super polished mirror shine surface to them, it's really hard for them to actually grip onto that and connect in a meaningful way, because you're not providing or sharing the kind of cracks and scuffs and the challenges you're really facing that allow them to empathize and create connection, and know where you really need the most help and how to add the most value. So it really behooves entrepreneurs to be able to show up as themselves and have the strength to ask for help. And that way when you have that combination, you not only find the right people that can help you, but you're really able to connect in a meaningful way that builds a lasting relationship.
Mm-hmm. Not only that, but the truth always comes out eventually. So there's always that component at play.
Yeah. So what are some examples of times when you're connecting with someone, or some of the key connections you've made, and how did those come about? Because I think I've had another guest on the show who talked about how, like, actually finding mentors and guides for a business, you can't go around saying, hey, I need a mentor. Hey, I need a mentor. It's usually much more organic process. So what are the ways you went about and to find these key relationships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You definitely can't go around and be like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. People are gonna be like, I don't know about that. Really just having to observe, and what circles do you want to surround yourself or be a part of first, without going and asking that question, because you don't want to ask it too soon of somebody, to your point, because you don't even know who that person is. Maybe you really want to be around people that you admire from afar, and really see if there's validation to the admiration that you have for them. And you can get that from people the more time you spend around them, and really observe, who are these people? What do they do? Not what they say, but what do they do? And if there's value alignment, and you believe that, that's somebody that you want to intentionally connect with, start with a connection of just building a friendship to start. It doesn't have to be a business relationship. Some of the key people that are involved in my business that sit on my board, they're not paid. I don't pay anybody. They are organic relationships that were built on friendship first, and grew from there. And there was an intentional effort to just be around those people, because they were older, they were wiser, and I saw that in them. And I didn't necessarily seek to find, in this instance, board members. But it organically ended up happening, where they got involved with me without me having to ask for it. So it really just starts with a genuine connection with people. And I think there's always going to be an element of like that speed dating game, where you see somebody and you're like, oh, that person seems like we may be values aligned, and then you get around them and you find out yes or no. So I think there's an element of that, but to your point, I mean, organic relationships, they happen. They don't happen by just happenstance. Like you have to actually take some action to, put yourself out there and get around those people. But from there, it needs to happen organically.
Yeah, and I think it's really like that what you said about how you kind of got these board members involved, which was, it wasn't hey, I want you to be a board member, or it was you had a strong enough personal relationship that when the opportunity arose, they stepped up because they have a connection and an emotional investment in seeing you succeed and wanting to help you succeed. And there's so much power in having those sorts of connections when you're running a business, because like I said earlier, there's so much you don't know. And if you're able to connect with people by being your authentic self, and then people will want to step up in those ways. That if it was purely like asking someone to be on your board because of just like their resume or their work history, but not really having a personal connection, it wouldn't be nearly as effective of a board member for you, because they really don't know you or your business.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It becomes very transactional at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I do think you need to have a balance of both. I mean, the rebar and concrete of a business relationship is some transactional, some relationship stuff. But when you just have one or the other, it's trickier and harder to keep going. But I think it's really, I like that you have that. I think approaching the process of finding those sorts of relationships with providing enough space to pour concrete around the rebar, I think is really important. Where you just come from we just need the transaction, we just need this result, we just need the business result side, and you're not giving yourself the space or investing the time to build the relationship side, then you're if you do get something, it's not going to be enough to really build on top of.
For sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's
So
a great. I like the concrete around the rebar analogy. That's a great analogy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it solidifies the concept, I think, in a great way. And yes, I use solidifies as the pun there. I'm not going to apologize for that. So when you're running your business now, because you have some great relationships, you have these board members, how do you go about figuring out who you need to meet next? Because it's, as your business scales, you're all going to need different people at different times with different skill sets. So what is your process for figuring out the kind of next relationships you need to add to your network?
I'd say there's probably a snowballing effect, right? You make one great connection that advocates for you as a person, opens up the door to other people that are in their network. So, I think that's one avenue. Maybe you don't rely on that one a whole 100%, but there's definitely something to be said about, proving out your relationship with somebody who has credibility and a network that they can also expose you to. That's probably at the core of sort of how I think about when I'm with these people, being genuine, being authentic, proving that I'm going to do what I say. That ends up opening up doors. I mean, I don't want to get into specific examples, but I've had that happen multiple times recently. But then, there's a huge component to our business. And I'm just strictly speaking from a business context, where the biggest thing that we're focused on is talent acquisition for our company. So really opening up the doors for who's the next hire, who's the next key hire who is going to help take us to the next level. And that's really where our focus has shifted. And in a lot of cases, we've leaned on connections that maybe they're through the board or maybe they're through just personal network. So that's kind of where our and I say our because of me and our president, we do most of the networking and hiring. but yeah, that's really where our focus is. And I think it's really going to take us, taking a step out for some of these roles where we get uncomfortable and we have to go into networking groups that we don't really know a whole lot about. We're a tech company, but I'm not a technical founder. Um, and one of the key pieces that we need is technology folks. So getting connected with the right spheres is really the focus.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I like what you said about that willingness, or that getting out of your comfort zone away and going into some of the groups that you're not as familiar with, because you're not a tech founder, but you need the tech people. So how much do you think that willingness to get out of the comfort zone, that mindset, excuse me, plays into this process? Because I think there's obviously there's a propensity for people to want to stay in their comfort zones, but I think for any leader who's looking to scale their company, they have to be able to grow as the company grows. Otherwise, they become the bottleneck. So how much has that willingness to get out of your comfort zone played into your success, do you think?
It's been huge. I mean, I went through a period with the company, just transparently, where I was unwilling to get uncomfortable and get out of my comfort zone. And the business sort of stagnated during that period, where I was kind of in this state where we had made it as a company. We were doing well and things were just going pretty good internally at the company. And I just kind of rested on my laurels and was like, I don't really need, to go make any connections. Well, as soon as you say that, you're not in a good spot. And I didn't know that at the time. I learned that after the fact. But really, we started to grow exponentially once I got out of my comfort zone and stopped resting on my laurels, and really went and got active and tried to make human connections that were outside of like internal hires at the company. So yeah, there's a huge emphasis, and I think that it's only going to grow from where we're at today, because we can't get to where we're going unless we get outside of our comfort zone. Not just like me personally, but the company in general. Like we cannot stay comfortable. There is growth and discomfort. So yeah, it's a huge emphasis for us.
And what do you think what was it something you found that helps you get that push out of your comfort zone initially? Because it's something that once you're kind of stuck in there, it can be really easy to get complacent. So what was it that helped you kind of crowbar yourself out of that box and make that change?
I'd say recognizing stagnation, that things weren't going as well as we thought. And, you know, I'll call it like just a drive within me that if I feel like I'm failing at something, I 10X, I start 10Xing. And that's just kind of how I was raised a little bit of, I'll work really hard once I feel like I'm failing. But then I'll stagnate, right? And I think it's a repeat pattern that you really have to recognize in yourself and get ahead of it. Like as I've gotten older, as these gray whiskers have come in on my chin, that's where I start to realize like, man, as soon as I start to say we made it, that's when I know it's over. Like we have to stay ahead of this. And that's for me personally, as well as the company. And I think that translates to a ton of people and a ton of companies who have said similar statements, thinking that they are good and don't need to be pushed outside of their comfort zone.
Yeah, I love that advice and that awareness, or recognizing the pattern of got to do the 10X because things aren't working out. You do the 10X, you see the growth, and then you start to taper off again, and you have that mindset shift back to, okay, we made it, we're good. I don't have to do this anymore, or I can slow down, and then the cycle repeats itself. So having the wisdom to recognize when you're starting to slip back into that old mindset is really important, because I think it's very insidious, it's like mental routine that happens when you achieve a goal or you achieve some milestone and you immediately take your foot off the gas. And well, yeah, you need breaks and need to make sure you're growing sustainably, but having that, avoiding the complacency, I think is a key success factor that you often, if you don't have you don't have good connections, good people supporting you, you got to learn it the hard way. And then sometimes you don't make it past that initial setback. Though, well, I want to thank you so much for connecting with me today, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please leave a comment, and subscribe. Want to connect with myself or Greg, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.